Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to the Weekend Wellness Hour show. Very excited to have an amazing person, world traveler who kindred spirit of mine because he's been all over the world and has a lot to share about basically personal journeys and self-actualization. So Tim Shields is joining us. He's an editor for Dr. Joe Dispenza. He is an author in his own right, and he has much to share. And thank you so much for joining us today, Tim.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Really appreciate it. And when I learned about your story of, kind of traveling around the world, that connected me to you immediately. But you also took those journeys to help you learn more about yourself. And now you're using it to help other people, and really appreciate it. So can you share a little bit about your background, kind of what led you to here?
Well, I always wanted to be a writer. So I decided at age 17 that I wanted to be a writer. And, it's quite a challenging path. And I just I wrote about it in my first book, A Curious Year in the Great Vivarium Experiment, that it's about a lot of things. Is about the dream of the 17-year-old. And it's like the power of that dream is like shooting a grappling hook out into the future. And you just have to have the strength and the courage to hold on to that line going up the mountain. But, I started as a journal writer, and I probably have 58 journals of my life on paper. And also when I was 17, I started like asking to be used as an instrument of peace. And, as time went on and I started adulting and chasing jobs, like at the beginning of the .com or the end of the .com bust, I kind of forgot about that. And then at some point, probably around like 35, I was like, wow, I used to ask to be used an instrument of peace. And I started saying that again. And there's sort of a longer backstory to this, but I wound up, actually, I'll just say it really quick. I went to a Dr. Joe Dispenza, like sort of my first advanced meditation retreat. And the whole time I was, focusing my thought on, I wanted a mentor and I wanted a full-time job to finish my book. Because up until that point, I had been freelancing in marketing, advertising world for most of my career. So the whole time I was beating myself up. I'm like, I'm not doing this right. Everybody's having this profound mystical experiences. And then, the minute I land back in Seattle, a friend who had been working at Microsoft for 10 years reached out. He's like, hey, I'm at this new job. It's like this new unicorn company. We need a writer. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Literally still on the tarmac in the plane. And then I take the light rail into Seattle and I run into him on a street corner. He's like, you really got to check this job out. I think it's the perfect one for you. So basically, long story short, I get the job. I make more money than I ever thought I would make in the corporate world. And every day before work, I would go to a coffee shop for 30 minutes to an hour plus on a good day to work on this draft of my book that I was stuck on. Well, at exactly 6 months, I finished the book. I finished this draft of the book and I was like, wow, I think I have a book here. And at that exact same time, I got laid off from that job. And I was in such a good place. And I was actually kind of psyched because I'm like, I can work on my book more all winter. As I walked out of the building, which I tend to do sometimes, I'm doing it more and more, but, I said out loud, all right, what amazing things about to happen to me. And literally within 5 minutes, I get Dr. Joe Dispenza's assistant reaches out and he's like, hey, Dr. Joe wants to talk to you about, working with you to help him edit some of his work. And I was like, amazing. So long story short, I get this other job. It lasts about 9 months. I think I'm going to be there, as for my life until I hit this writing thing that I've always dreamed of. 9 months in, he's like, hey, what would you think about helping me with my book, Becoming Supernatural? And I was like, watch how fast I quit my job. So I quit my job. That was like 6+ years ago. And I've just been, not that it's been a bit of a roller coaster, but I am living the dream. It's much different than I had imagined, but how boring it would be if it turned out exactly how we had thought.
Yeah. Yeah. There wouldn't be as much growth in our life if it just is that same trajectory. You have to have the ups and downs.
Oh,
And
definitely. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So you started off, so this book, A Curious Year, an experiment, the Great Vivarium. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Is it based on your travels younger, or is it
Yeah.
something different?
It's called A Curious Year in the Great Vivarium Experiment.
Mhm.
I'll explain the title really quick. I lived close to the Seattle Sculpture Park, and I would walk through this vivarium every day. And it was like this nurse log that fell 30 miles away, and the structure over it mimicked the natural environment. So I would just walk through it, on my way home from work. And one day I never noticed the chalkboard before, and it said Vive means life, Vivarium means a place of life. And I was like, oh my God, this is the concept of the book. Inside the vivarium is our individual life's journey. Outside it is what we're all connected to, consciousness. So, basically, I always knew that if I wanted to write about big things, I had to have big experiences. And I had about a decade of sick parents. So, the opening of the decade, or maybe 3 years in, my father passed away. And then 2020, June 2020, my mother passed away. So I had been going home for, my vacations were going home to see my parents in New Jersey. So I was like, all right, it's my time. And, I just, like, people are like, well, what were you seeking in India? And I was like, well, it was the cheapest place I could go. So, but I had sort of opened myself up, and this is what I try to do. I try to open myself up to possibilities, and I ask the questions, and then I just, move forward and listen and whatever. And I mean, I was like, where should I go? And in like the next 4 days, India showed up like everywhere in my life. And I was like, I guess I'm going to India. So I just booked a one-way ticket to India, without a plan or a clue. The first 2 days in New Delhi, I was like, I've made a huge mistake. It's just like, what was I trying to prove? This is terrifying. But then everything unfolded, and I was like, part of the structural element of this book, and an exercise I still do every day, is I keep a gratitude intention journal. I write down 5 things I'm grateful for and 5 things I want to create. And I actually, like, after my mom passed away, I thought I was ready, but it rocked my world, and I felt very lost. And this one woman who was a friend of my sister's was like, okay, you're a writer. I want you to do this exercise. I want you to do this gratitude intention journal. She's like, you're going to find that the things you create today are going to be things you're grateful for in the future. And I was like, I'll try anything at this point. Yeah. So anyway, I just started doing that, and things started unfolding like that. And I was like, I want the right job for right now. I surrendered money, blah, 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 blah. And it's like the perfect job showed up that kept paying me while I was like traveling through India. And I was like, I want to be of service. And I wound up getting connected to this guy who's won the equivalent of 2 Nobel Prizes. He's one of the world's most important environmental lawyers. He sued the state of India over the course of 20 years to create a green zone around the Taj Mahal, because like acid rain and the industry around it was pitting, the white marble, and it was turning yellow, and he was calling it, I don't know, marble cancer or something like that. And so anyway, I still do this exercise, every day. And that started 11 years ago. Not every day, but like pretty religiously. Some days, I fall, I miss a couple of days, but it's an objective, it's a very simple objective exercise to have a measurement of the mind's effect upon reality. Which is, the deeper I go into my journey, it's like everything is your state of consciousness, and I think part of why I've done a lot of the things, like, bought a one-way ticket to India, moved to Mexico, twice, is because I sort of grew up in this fear bubble of my mother. And it's like, it's like swinging the pendulum the other way, and I realized recently, probably like the 2 most powerful programs of my life, because, everything is from the very early age, conditioning and programming. And it's like my mother was this very fearful person. And then my father had like this unworthiness thing, which I found out was as a result of him being the only person to survive an attack on his squad in World War II. And I didn't find that out until, after he passed away. And that he also, I mean, I knew he got a Purple Heart because you get that for being injured in combat, but he also got a Bronze Star, which is like the third highest honor. And so I'm just, as a writer, I'm just like unraveling and unwrapping the mystery of myself. Hopefully if I do it right, as a mirror to the, an individual as a mirror to the universal or the collective, and that works vice versa. But so.
Yeah. So when you're going through this journey, so you're going around India, you're living in Mexico, you're trying to find yourself, what was the kind of the turning point where you felt, okay, I'm making some progress? Was it attending Dr. Joe Dispenza's events and going through this process, looking at neuroscience and the brain? Or was it just the travel itself and meeting people along the way, or volunteer experience? What was it that got you?
Well, I'm working on this new book about self-actualization. And, I mean, for me as a writer, what I'm interested is the intersection of the external world and my internal world. The physical and the mind. And so I do these big, crazy things because I'm seeking experiences, to write about. And these experiences in the external world are, in a sense, a mirror of your internal world. And it's, as a writer, I'm interpreting these things. And I think the beauty of travel is it gets you so far out of your comfort zone. And when you are so far out of your comfort zone, your senses are heightened. So it's like you are seeing, smelling, experiencing things that, you wouldn't experience in your day-to-day life because you're in your day-to-day life. But in your day-to-day life, generally your senses aren't heightened, to a greater percentage. And I think when those senses are heightened, you're open to more things, and then you're open to meeting different people, and then you have these amazing conversations, and you learn about different cultures, and that all expands you. And I mean, I'm interested in expansion, and the expansion of, my consciousness, which is, that's a good aspect of what this whole next book is about. But I'm actually, like, this book, I created like a completely new model of self-actualization. And then also there's like an evolution of the hero's journey, like Joseph Campbell's hero's journey on top of it, the hero's journey being the evolution of consciousness. And it sounds super heady, but I'm explaining it to my 17-year-old self.
Okay.
Because, if this quantum reality is the real reality, there is no time. There is only this present moment. So like, I'm talking to my 17-year-old self to teach him all these things. So if he learns these earlier, it will affect our current and future timelines. Hopefully I say, yeah, it's a little heady, but I say it in a more simplistic way in the book.
Right. So how would you define self-actualization then? Because that can be different for different people.
Yeah. In this book, I define self-actualization as the pursuit, execution, and realization of your greatest potential in its highest and fullest expression.
Okay. So that does make it a journey then.
It does, yeah. And the thing, I didn't like set out to write this book. The idea kind of came in during lockdown 1. And I was living in Texas, like as the world kind of was shutting down. And I was working with this woman working on her book. And she lived in New Braunfels, Texas, which is in between Austin and San Antonio. And there was basically nothing to do except work and whatever. And then she lived in this sort of private community that had access to the Guadalupe River. And I would just go down there one time. I'd park at the top and I'd walk down. And we had been talking about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And, you know, self-actualization exists at the top of a triangle. And it just like, you know, this idea just came in. I'm like, well, that's the wrong thing, because that suggests you have reached a pinnacle or an apex, you know, an ultimate state. But self-actualization is a modeled expansion. So my whole model is based on concentric circles. And, you know, you leap these to these next rungs of self-actualization by overcoming fear, you know, because the bigger your life gets, the more initiations and challenges you come up against. But those are just opportunities to leap across that threshold of fear. I mean, you know, one of the most terrifying things, I mean, I write about it in the first book, but like my sister driving me to the airport to go to India, and my like 10-year-old niece is in the back, and I'm like, you know, sobbing in the front seat. I mean, I had this like huge massage that morning. I think it loosened up a lot of stuff, but then I'm just like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? What am I trying to prove to anybody, you know? But when I was much younger, you know, high school, college, like reading Joyce, Steinbeck, Hemingway, all of these huge people. And I was like, that's the life I want to live. I want to like have the freedom to travel and meet people and express my soul's journey in this life.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I catch from what you're saying is when you make it into a journey, the self-actualization process, you're not putting a finite limit on it. There's not that ceiling. Because one of the things that we find in life is the more you're working on growth, the more you feel like you're living, you're pushing the limits. But if you already reach this pinnacle and that's it, you stop growing and then you start to fall backwards. So why not have it as a journey, something that you can continue to progress and grow? Because we also change too. My interests now very different than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I can see how you can come to that conclusion.
Yeah. And when you reach that pinnacle or that state, it's time for the next dream.
Right.
It's like you don't just be like, all right, I've arrived. It's like, okay, what do I want to do now? And through this you know, this model of self-actualization or this you know, what I've sort of evolved Joseph Campbell's hero's journey into, it's like, you know, probably around like 7 or 8 is the calling, and then the calling is about the service to others. So I think when you get to that place, which seems like the pinnacle, it's like, well, what else is there? And it's like, well, I want to affect the world. I want to you know, I want to have a positive effect on community, on whatever, you know. So that's just a bigger, you know, rung of the circles.
Right. And so for someone who's looking to kind of start a journey like this, what do you recommend? How do they get started? What are some of the steps? What do you think of?
Well, I mean, I think the gratitude and intention exercise is a really simple thing. It's just, I think there's like is there a little feedback back there or something like that?
I don't hear right now.
Oh, okay. All right. That's cool. If you don't hear it, then that's fine. The gratitude and intention journal, I think, is a great way to start. I think you actually have to open yourself up to communication with something bigger. And I think that's about surrender and trust, which is the biggest thing in my life. And that is like what I am exploring in my work, you know, and I, in this new book, I say, I'm talking to my 17-year-old self, and I say, I think every life has a central question that they are trying to answer. And I'm like, I call myself young Timothy in this book. And I'm like, young Timothy, I'm going to save you a lot of time and tell you what your life's question is. And it's, am I powerful enough do I believe in myself enough to become the creator, executor, and master of the dream? So, you know, I am definitely connected to something bigger, and I can't imagine my life like just being a human in this human dimension. Like I think, and I write a lot about dimensions in this book, but like, you know, this is just, we're in this three-dimensional existence of height, width, and depth, and physical matter. But, you know, energy exists before matter. Energy is what brings life to matter. So, you know, I think there is a higher self, that is already there where you want to be, and you just have to like connect with that higher self and ask for guidance and listen. And the more you open yourself up, you know, just like you get feedback and serendipity and synchronicities in your life. You know, it happens to me all the time. And I just kind of, I move in that direction, you know. Like I live probably a very different life from most people. I don't go to like a job every day or anything like that. And I'm very free to move about wherever, but, you know, I just ask the question. I write it out. I write out what I want to create. And, you know, I close the book, I surrender and trust, and allow it to come about in a more fantastic way than what I've actually written.
Do you also take some time to see what action you can take that helps boost those intentions along or boost those ideas along? Because I know there's part of it of becoming aware of what you want or need, as well as, you know, voicing it, clarifying it, but also, is there a way that you take some action surrounding it too?
Yeah, I mean, there has to be, you know, an alignment of like right thought, right action, right speech, whatever. So, you know, I think that, you know, as you move forward, as you push into these, you know, these new realms and aspects of your life, if you are in alignment, matter conforms to your will. So it's like so many people think about, you know, writing the book or switching the job or whatever, but nothing happens until you step forward in that direction. And then once you step forward in that direction, it's almost like a tunnel boring machine. It's like, you know, there's a wall, and it's like your will just starts to create this tunnel, and, you know, and it clears out all of the shit, you know, that's in your way. And
Right.
you really just got to stay open. And again, like staying open means not going back to the former self, not allowing fear to you know, tether you back to where you were stationary, where you weren't happy about your life and all that.
Yeah. And we know fear is very, very easy to get caught up in. I mean, it stops us in our tracks. And it's hard because if you don't address that fear on a daily basis, you get sucked back in.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I mean, that's also, you know, probably one of the most significant things I did in my life is starting to meditate. You know, I started about 11 years ago. About 6 years ago, I really committed to it. And it's like, you know, when you close your eyes and you shut out the external world and you're just in this internal world of energy and you know, and love and everything, it's like the more you stay in that energy and frequency of love or whatever you want to create, I mean, you are daily systematically making these micro shifts, because most of us are just moving along unconsciously. So meditation is an opportunity to pause, become present. Everything comes out of the present moment, and you know, and move into the feeling of what that future creation is. I mean, you know, Dr. Joe Dispenza would say, the thought sends the signal out, the feeling pulls it back. And it's like, you might be, you know, if you are going to create something, it's like dropping a stone in a pond. And when you drop a stone in the pond, that signal, the information on that wave, the ripple is moving out, but you have no idea how big the pond is that you're trying to create from. So at some point though, that wave hits the edge of the pond and it comes back to you. So that is like the thought sending the signal out, the feeling pulling it back in.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I could see how that can help shift people too. If you can kind of quell some of your fears, you're no longer sending that signal out. So you're not going to have a reciprocal reaction related to that too.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think something like by the time you're 35, 95% of your like being is in an unconscious program. So it's like, we have to bring light to that darkness or the shadow self or whatever. It's like, the more light you bring to those unconscious programs, the freer you are going to become to be the greatest aspect of yourself, to create whatever you want to do, all that stuff, and I mean, I've been, in my meditation, I've been like creating this moment for 10 years or something like that, and I've been journaling about it for forever, and I've basically got like one paper draft left, one draft of edits in this book, and then I'm putting this baby out into the world, and finding a home for it. And I'm excited because it's really like I also talk a lot about like artists in this book, and I think artists are like code breakers. My personal mission statement is I translate light, frequency, and energy into story so as to lead others to their truth. So at all times, we are walking through these, we're walking through fields of energy, and they all exist at different frequencies. And who you are being matches the information that exists at that frequency. So this book, I mean, I really, I don't like to go like too woo-woo or anything like that, but it really was kind of downloaded. And it was, I serendipitously I was in a clubhouse, and I connected with this woman, Kimberly Meredith, whose book is coming out this week, called Awakening to the Fifth Dimension on Hay House. And we became friends, and she connected me with this other agent. And I told him sort of what I wanted to do, and he's like, "Well, you need to just put out like a nonfiction book first." And I was like, "Okay." And one day I sketched out this outline on my whiteboard, and I'm like, "Okay, this shouldn't be too hard." And I just, something completely different came in, and I wouldn't even know what the next chapter was about. And like sometimes that would cause me a little bit of anxiety, but I would just like, all right, I'm just going to go for a walk in a canyon or something like that, and just see what comes in. And, between my walks and meditation, that's where it comes in. And for me, I think this is kind of interesting because my sister is a visual artist. So in her meditation, she gets like imagery and colors and all this stuff. And in mine, it's like my own voice lecturing to me. And the information is just coming in. And if I'm writing, I've noticed like, I like go like this, and it's like this like palsiated thing. And I'm like, and it's just coming through me. And I'm like, oh my God, just like, and I remember like reading about, artists and writers or whatever when I was younger. And then they talked about that state, and it's just, it's the erasure of the ego, I guess, and the self. And you're just tapping into something, and it's just, you can see a musician on a stage just in that space. They're not even there. They're just, so.
And I get that. I'm a photographer as well. And when I'm out in nature, nothing else matters. No bodily functions matter. It's just you and nature. So I can see how that can come across for you when you're writing. And I'm curious though, if you're meditating and you're getting these downloads, do you stop and take notes in your meditation, or do you complete your meditation and then purge it all into some paper afterwards?
I complete my meditation, but I might like put my thumb like on my leg And I'm like, okay, I have to remember that one thing. And then like, sometimes there'll be like 4 things and I might not remember them, but as soon as I'm done, I start writing them down. And then maybe like a day later, I'll be like, oh my God, that came through in my meditation. And so, yeah, I mean, I talk about like in this book, like when the muse, like if you want to have a relationship with the muse, with this, higher self, then when it speaks, you have to give it, reverence and respect and attention. And so, I might be like in the shower or something and just like, like dripping all over the floor, grab my phone and blah, 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 blah. I just had this voice memo I found from 2 or 3 nights ago at 3:18 in the morning. And I said something like, we are just, we're consciousness moving through a carbon-based dimension. It's like, I'm like,
Yeah.
that didn't come from me, or it came from the subconscious or something. And it's an idea that something to move into, that I need to move into this draft or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think the more you open yourself up to communication with this higher thing, with energy, God, Buddha, Krishna, Christ, and whatever you want to call it, the more you open up to it, the more it communicates with you. And then, it sort of acts as like a GPS system, at least for me.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I can see how your ability to create something can just expand exponentially, because you're no longer being constrained to just limits that we set of ourselves and the environment we're in. You're now tapping into something else that has unlimited potential.
Yeah. I mean, Bob Dylan said in like a 1969 interview in like Far Out magazine or something, but he's like, the songs are all there. If I didn't write them, somebody else would. So he's just tapping into like, he was that energy in that space and time, whatever. And he tapped into it and,
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible.
Robert Zimmerman became Bob Dylan. Yeah.
That's where you get all these greats. So I'm curious too, because when we think about the potential of our mind to create, whether create its art, create ourselves, create health for us, create whatever our journey is, have you seen evidence besides yourself? Have you seen evidence of there, especially maybe at Dr. Joe Dispenza's events, where people transform quickly? Or do you see it more as a long-term process?
I mean, at his events, I have seen people have spontaneous healings. And it's just, it's you completely getting out of the way and tapping into this infinite field of energy and tapping into the potential of you being healthy. Let's say, I mean, people have, healed themselves of stage 4 cancer, genetic disorders, MS, lupus, you name it, people have healed themselves. And it's just completely getting out of the way, and for a lot of people, let's say, for instance, if they're sick or they have cancer, like that becomes their story. But these people are healing themselves. They transcend that story and they are tapping into their future self who is healthy. And some people, it's a journey of months or years or something, but they keep showing up and doing the work, showing up, connecting, showing that they are like, okay, I'm here to connect with you. I'm here to, heal. And, but some people, I mean, they just can do it instantaneously. And I mean, they're doing some really, really profound science now. A friend of mine connected him to like UCSD. So they have research to like state-of-the-art laboratories. So they're figuring out amazing things that occur in the blood of advanced meditators that don't occur in regular people. And I mean, what they are going to have a paper coming out that basically shows, including the images of the cells and everything, that advanced meditators make themselves resistant to COVID.
That's awesome. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's potentially paradigm shifting. And then they've like spun well, actually, I don't even know if I'm supposed to talk about that stuff yet, but there's some pretty big, amazing things happening. So,
Yeah.
Joe has had this, this idea and this theory his whole life, and he has just continued to move forward that despite people trying to take him down, saying he's a quack, whatever. And, he is an example of this, a self-actualized person, and continuing to move into deeper, uh, you know, deeper rungs of that expanding circle. And I mean, I learned so much just by watching him, and and I mean, he's like the most abundant person I've ever met. I mean, especially now, but he's kept moving forward, and everybody to expand his vision has just continuously shown up. I went to my first workshop in 2010, and it was probably 75 people, maybe 100 people.
Wow.
And now he sells out, a $1,500 event, 1,500 person event in 7 minutes with like hundreds, if not thousands of people on the waiting list.
Yeah,
because it's incredible. The truth. I mean, people, when you are living and being the truth, people recognize that. And then, if you make these changes and then you go back into your regular life, people are, what do you got going on? What are you smoking? What's going on there?
Yeah.
So, I mean, anybody probably, you could just, if you have a condition like a sickness or something, you could probably just put into just YouTube, like Dr. Joe Dispenza testimonial breast cancer, and you will see hundreds of people who have healed themselves.
It's incredible.
Talk about that journey. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing. And when you get around people who are making these changes, it's inspirational, it's motivational. It helps us just realize this is all a practice, and we can get rid of so much that we've been programmed since we were a kid or before that. It's really incredible. And I enjoy speaking to people like you who are on these journeys and share and help other people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what I believe I'm here for. It's like, I've known it for a very long time, and I've tried to get off this writing train. I'm like, I just want a full-time job and good health insurance, and but life has just kicked me off that train continuously. So when that keeps happening, you got to be like, okay, why am I here? What am I doing? What do what's my offering?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I really appreciate this. And thank you for sharing, both about your previous book and your upcoming one. How can people look you up, research you, reach out to you? What can you give us?
Well, my website is acuriousyear.com. That's my my book's website, and you can reach me through that. Okay. Instagram is @TheRealTimShields. And I haven't been as active there, but I was not a big fan of the self-promotion thing. And then one day I was like, oh, I can actually use this as a writing exercise to express my ideas. So actually, that probably started, I don't know how long ago it started, but when I was, the beginning of COVID, when I was in Texas, I started doing videos on there, and they became a way to catalog the ideas that I was working on. So like early back then, I'm talking about, self-actualization, which I didn't even know that this was going to become a book like a year and a half later. And, some of the pictures, I have writings underneath, which, one of them, actually, I won't say which one, but it's the very end of this book that I'm working on. So either acuriousyear.com or @TheRealTimShields on Instagram.
Okay. And do you have a projected date of release for your new book?
Well, I'm just gonna, that's kind of up to the powers that be. I'm gonna send it to the agent I'm working with probably in the next 2 weeks.
Oh, so getting along on it. Okay. That's wonderful. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for sharing your Saturday with us and sharing your wisdom and time. Really appreciate it. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate your time and your attention. Have a great rest of your weekend. We'll see you again next weekend. Take care now. Bye.
Oh.